In this video, we will discuss generating the cluster growth profile using the Statistical Report Program. So here I have SRP open, and the first thing that I need to look at is at the top. We need to make sure that we have the cluster selected. And so if you've drilled down to a locality, select the cluster so that the data that is showing is for the whole cluster. After we've selected the cluster, we need to update the database so that it is current to the current state of things in our cluster as of the date we want to generate the cluster growth profile. So moving to the right across the top, we'll update any information about the localities. Mostly this is just static. For localities, you may have new focus neighborhoods, and so you can update. You could add a new focus neighborhood if needed. Under individuals, just review all the individuals to make sure any individuals who have entered the core activities or declared have been added here. Individuals who've moved away have been archived. Also, individuals who have completed the certain units of Book 10, it's important to note who those individuals are and put in the comments field for that individual the hashtag for the particular unit book that they completed. So I know this individual has completed Units 1 of Book 8, so I'll put Book 8.1. Also, I know they've completed Units 2 of the book. So I'll put pound B 8.2. So this individual has completed both those units, but they have not completed the third unit yet, and so I can't go and check the box here because they haven't completed all 3 units yet. But we still do want to know that they've completed those 2. So I'll click Save and Close. Under individuals, again, I'll go to an adult. And so this individual I know has completed books 10.1. Save and close. Okay, so once the all the individual information is up to date, I'll move over to activities. Here it's best to review what's happening in your cluster in terms of core activities, children's classes, junior youth, and study circles, and add any new activities that don't exist here, and complete any, or mark them as complete, any of the activities that have been completed. One thing to note is when you are completing an activity, it's good to review the teacher, sorry, this is a children's class, but it's similar thing there. Review the tutors and then review the participants to make sure that at the end of the class this is still the makeup of the study circle, since sometimes they change and sometimes people aren't able to complete it, or people are added along the way. So once the activities are up to date, then our database is up to date. It's ready to generate the cluster growth profile, and so we'll move to the Cycles tab. So this is a tab that shows a record for each cycle that has occurred in our cluster. You can create a cycle at any point, or you can create a cycle record at any point during the cycle. And so if the cycle started on July 1st, like it's shown here, I could go in and create the cycle record right on July 1st, or I can wait until the end of the cycle. It doesn't really matter. But since I created it already, it exists, and so instead of creating a new one here, I will just click on the start date of the cycle to edit it. And under basic information, I'll make sure that the start date and end date are correct. You can edit those if needed. I will enter in the number of friends participating in expansion phase.
And then here you can enter in any comments about the particular cycle. So this would be maybe what happened during the expansion phase, any learning that took place during the cycle, anything that the cluster institutions would be interested in can be entered here in the comments field. So when I'm done with that, I'll click over on locality data. This table is a table of all localities in the cluster, and it will list statistics on devotional meetings, 19-day feast attendance, holy day attendance, and number of home visits conducted. So it's important to review for each locality these different fields and update as needed. So when you're done with updating this table, you can move over to, it's best to hit save, and then move over to cycle data. Now this is the information that is stored for each cycle. So when a cycle record is created, so say I created the cycle record on July 1st. When that record was created, it looked at the current state of the database as of July 1st and saved all this information for this cycle. So as of July 1st, 221 people completed book 1, 169 completed book 2, etc. And for all these tables. And so there's and so all this information is really captured from the database itself. You don't really need to edit any of this information, though it does allow you to edit it. So if I know there were 222 people have completed book 1, I could enter that manually in here. However, something to be aware of is that if you see a discrepancy here, it probably means there's something that's not quite right or not quite updated correctly in the database, and so it's best to go back to where this information, the source of this information, and update it there, so that in the future you don't have to constantly be updating the summary information. So if I know there are 222 people who've completed book 1 and it's only showing 221, it's best to go back into the individuals tab and figure out who is the individual who hasn't completed the book or isn't marked as completed the book 1, and then check the box for that individual. There are 3 boxes that we have to update in this section, and those 3 are under Table 3. Number of children and junior youth registered during the cycle we need to update. Number of youth and adults enrolled, and number of newly enrolled believers in the institute process. Those 3 boxes we have to update on this tab here. So we'll do that there and hit save. Now, as I mentioned before, this data is current as of July 1st. Now, between July 1st and September 30th, there hopefully has been significant change in the database, or there likely is, but that information is not reflected here. However, we want the cluster growth profile to be as of the end date of the cycle. So we need to force this program to update this information as of September 30th. So for example, say it says here, book 2, 169 people have completed book 2. And I'm going to go and update one individual. Fine, I'm looking for someone who has not completed book 2 yet. Okay, here's an individual who's not completed book 2, so I'm going to check the box for them. Say I know they have completed book 2. So I've made an update to this database. This still says 169 people have completed book 2 because this data is as of when I created the cycle,
record, which was on July 1st. I've updated the database. It's now September 30th, and I want that new information to be reflected in this table. So what I have to do is come in here and click on Recalculate Cycle Data, and we should get an update. Okay, so it's not letting me, so I'm going to exit the program. Occasionally I've run into a case where the program is just not responding the way I expect, and it requires a reset. So I'll go back into the clusters, Cycle Data tab, Recalculate Cycle Data. The problem is I had already edited it, and so I have to click on Reset so that it displays the actual information. So if you do edit the data, then the data from the database is not going to be showing up here anymore. And so I reset it, and now we see 170 people have completed Book 2. So that's just something to be aware of, is that before generating the cluster growth profile, it's good to come here and recalculate the cycle data so that it's current as of the date that you're generating the cluster growth profile. So once we're done updating the cycle information, we can actually generate the report, and we do that under the Reports tab. Under General Reports, Summary Reports, at the bottom is Cluster Growth Profile, and this generates the profile that we're accustomed to. We can create a printable report, which is PDF, or we can export it to Excel. Now this report does, you'll notice it only lists book 8 and 10. It doesn't list the different units of those two books. In addition, it's missing the 3 tables at the end that are common to cluster growth profiles in the Prairie States region. And for that for this reason, we're going to use a different tool to generate our cluster growth profile so that it has this other supplemental information in it. This other tool is called SRP Reports. That's here on your desktop. So if you just double click on that, it opens this window. And so this tool is basically just a reporting tool that pulls information from the SRP database, plus a little bit of supplemental information. So to use the tool, we need to just first select our cluster. So it's displayed here. Then we click on Edit Youth Continuum, and this information is for one of those supplemental tables in the CGP. And so this is a list of all youth 15 to 30 years of age in the cluster, and their corresponding point in the youth continuum. So we just need to review this list and make any necessary changes to it. Like that, and we click Save. Now this is saved so that next time you come in, it'll look the same. And so every time you generate a cluster growth profile, it's best just to review this to make sure there aren't any changes. To the right of that tab, there's a Edit Shouldering Responsibility button that we need to click. And this is a list of every individual in the cluster, and whether they are attending devotions, whether they're hosting devotions, and whether they're part of a teaching team. So the 2 columns on the right are the only columns that are used for the cluster growth profile. You can choose to select whether they're attending devotions or not. However, that information is not currently used for the CGP. but it is saved in the database and can be accessed if that's something that is helpful to you. So again, it's best just to review this list and make any necessary changes to it and click Save. Okay, now we are ready to actually generate the cluster growth profile, and so we'll click on this button, Generate Cluster Growth Profile. It asks us the number of cycles to display. If we select 0, it will display all the cycles we've defined, and so it'll be all 7 cycles that exist here in SRP. Traditionally, we have only, the CGP only has 4 cycles, and so I'm going to enter 4 in to this box and click OK. It will ask me where I want to save it. I'm going to save it right to my desktop. I'm going to say overwrite something that's there already. And okay, so again, this this is asking me if I want to recalculate the supplemental data. So the supplemental data is information that we've entered here under the youth continuum and edit shouldering responsibility. So I had already created this cycle record on July 1st. It is now September 30th, and so I do want to update the supplemental data with the current state. Otherwise, I will get the data from back on July 1st, and I want the CGP to have the most recent data for the most recent cycle. So I'll click Yes. And it says it successfully generated it, and it tells me where it's stored, which is on my desktop. So I'll close this tool, minimize that, and I find the cluster growth profile here is on my desktop, and I can open it, and it looks pretty standard. If you notice under Table 1, it does have the information listed for the different units of Book 8 and 10, in addition to the whole 3 units. And also down at the bottom, there are the 3 supplemental tables, Table 6, 7, and 8, with data. And you notice the most recent cycle at the bottom is the one that contains data. The other cycles don't, because though we're just starting to use this new tool that actually keeps track of this information. And so it didn't exist prior to this cycle. Going forward, these additional cycles will start to be populated as we utilize this new tool.